to welcome you to the celebration. We'll let it begin with Miss Allison Gorber and Mary Beth singing a song.
I was walking through a room and I heard this piano coming from another room, and I happen to be very musical as well as Bob, and I'm a singer, and he was in there playing piano. So I walked in and I looked at him, and when he was playing, I thought, I love this man. And I never stopped loving him from that moment, and all the 30 years that we were married, it was absolutely the most musical event I could have ever had in my life. We would go around a lot of places, and if there was a piano anywhere, I mean anywhere, he would play it. He even played Mozart's piano when we were in Austria one time, and he wasn't supposed to touch it, but he did. And then people would say, do you know this song? And he'd say, just hum a few bars, let me see. And they would hum it, and he would play the entire song. He played everything and anything by ear. So all the music years that we had together, he would kind of say to me, when I kick off, he always started that way, you'll have to do this and this and this and this. And I thought, well, that's, yeah. So finally I said, you know, Bob, when you kick off, I need a CD. I said, so I need to be able to hear you when you're gone from my sight. So he said, okay, I'll go make one. So he called up the recording guy and said he was coming over to make a CD. So he goes over, walks in the door, and the man says, don't you have any music? Any sheet music? He said, no, I don't need music. He said, I have a little list of 20 songs right here, and I'm going to play them all. So he sat down at the piano, the recording began, he played all 20 songs, never needed a sheet music of any note, and didn't have to re-record any of them. It was perfect. So today, you will find, if you haven't found it already, when you come in, there's a box of CDs. And I ran off 200 of his piano CDs and 200 of his hymn CD. And you are welcome to take what you would like to have and keep that as a treasure, because I'm going to play him every day, knowing that he will always be here in my heart. So to celebrate, two of Bob's favorite songs were When We All Get to Heaven and Closer Walk with Thee. Now the one thing about it is when Bob played it, It was played in jazz and ragtime. And so, you know, it wasn't any slow stuff. He wasn't into slow stuff. But these girls are two of the most amazing singers that we have. And Alison Borper, we have known her for probably almost 40 years. And Bob and I used to sing under the direction of her mother, who played piano for our group. And then I met her, and I remember going over and seeing her first baby. And she is just an adorable person, and obviously has a very beautiful voice. And Mary Beth Daggett Boucher, new name. She has been also in our life for over 30 years, and she used to be our piano player at our little church that we have here, which is an amazing church because it has amazing music. And she played our piano until one day she had to go somewhere else. And so they asked Bob to play, and he has been playing at the little church here for almost 30 years. So that he plays Closer Walk in probably a little bit faster and more ragtime way than what we're going to hear. But Mary Beth can give it a whirl. And they're going to sing those two songs for you. Thank you.
I used to also go over and play for, actually, can we make it higher? I used to go over and play on Thursday nights for Bob and Pat.
How's that?
That's great. It'll stay. And it's for hours on Thursday night. I would just play, and they would sing Phantom of the Opera and all kinds of stuff. But well, okay, here we go, Bob.
While we walk the pilgrim's journey.
out yet. We're working from one microphone. As I look around the room, I see many familiar faces. Some of you I'm seeing for the first time. You probably all know who I am, because most recently I became famous. I'm Jamie Wiebrecht, the recent winner of the Spirit of Lake Quivira Award 2022. I thought you knew me. I simply followed in Bob's footsteps. He won the Spirit of Quivira Award in 2012. On this past Wednesday afternoon, my beautiful wife Deb and I stopped by and saw Pat and talked about putting the finishing touches on the event you have joined us on today. Pat asked me to share some of Bob's accomplishments, his interests, some more of his family's favorite stories. The majority of what you're going to hear from me today is true. I may at times embellish, but I've been given permission to do so. I'm so glad to see you're sitting, because when I rehearsed this on Thursday, it was an hour and a half. So sit back, relax, and let's enjoy the celebration of Bob. I met Bob at a regatta at Lake Weatherby up north near the airport 26 short years ago. Most of you hear the word regatta, and you probably think it's the license plate on the back of Bob's convertible. Well, what it really is a series of races that sailboats sail to see if we can win. At that time, the Lake Quivira Sailing Club was going through some rebuilding. So Bob asked me if I wanted to come sail on Lake Quivira. I couldn't have said yes any quicker. Bob recommended and sponsored me and my family to join Lake Quivira. I've been eternally grateful to Bob and Pat for enabling our family to enjoy Lake Quivira ever since. Now, I know, and so do you, that Bob lived his life to the fullest with very few regrets. But one of those regrets just so happened to be inviting me to sail. You see, I started sailing when I was 7 years old. I sailed competitively my entire lifetime. And truthfully, I got to be pretty good. So Pat shared with me that after a long race day on the water, Bob would come home, Pat would say, "Hey, Bob, how did it go today?" And Bob would say, "Jamie kicked our ass again." And for the record, I got permission to say ass. But enough about me. Let's talk about Bob. By chance, did any of you know that Bob was into music? Because at the age of age of 5, 2 years younger than when I started sailing, his musical career began and his love for the piano. For many of us, playing the piano, or any single instrument, for that matter, would be an accomplishment. Not for Bob. Bob excelled and was very accomplished playing multiple instruments. You see many of them here. The harmonica, the ukulele, the trombone, the trumpet, the banjo, the violin. I'm sure I'm missing some. But Bob's go-to was the piano. He loved to play that piano. What was amazing, as Pat said, Bob played the piano by ear. So sheet music was of no good. He did it all by ear. His exceptional talent on the piano enabled him to play at a number of different venues. He would play at local restaurants, various weddings. He even played at Von Maur, the department store, and many, many Lake Quivira events. His greatest accomplishment was performing every Sunday at the Lake Quivira ministry. And the songs you just heard. Love to do it. Oh, but I forgot. He also performed the harmonica at this place called Carnegie Hall. And he played the harmonica at Lincoln Center. I don't think anybody just gets to do that. But of course, Bob did. Not only could Bob play music, he could also sing. He started singing in college. Apparently, he needed an easy A to get his grade point up so he could get into dental school. So he took up singing 101, and bird watching. Over his lifetime, rumor has it, he became a better singer and bird watcher than a dentist, but I have nothing to validate that. Bob sang everywhere. He sang in the shower. He sang in choral groups. He sang in the barbershop quartets, which now explains to me why his hair looked so darn good every time I saw him. He sang with the Van Trapp family singers in the movie Sound of Music. No, that was the embellishment part. Not exactly. But he did sing with the KC Singers, toured in Italy, and won the gold medal in the competition in Austria. Of course he did. Bob was also the founding member of the Lake Quivira Funeral Dixieland Marching Jazz Band. It's a mouthful to say. This group was a group of highly skilled musicians that also didn't read any sheet music. They were accompanied by the late great Elma Hall with her raspy ragtime voice. Can't do that for you now. Those of you that know Bob was always on the move. Sitting idle was not Bob. That probably had something to do with the fact that Bob ran in 14 marathons, including the New York Marathon and Pikes Peak Marathon. Being the finely tuned athlete that Bob was, nutrition and health was always top of his mind. And what that translated into Bob was he had 12 Long John donuts before he did Pikes Peak. Speaking of health, by chance, and this is a sellout crowd to be expected, are any of Bob's physicians in the house? Dave. Yeah, so thank you. There were many more. No offense. But without you and others, we would not have been able to enjoy Bob as long as we did. Now, I assume you know, Bob had a great sense of humor, and apparently during one of the physician visits, the physician said, Bob, for this work we need to do on you, you're going to need to bring a driver. So someone's going to have to drive you home. So, Bob, you can't come to this appointment without bringing a driver. And so as Bob and only Bob can, Bob walked into the doctor's office carrying a driver. That could be true, that could be embellished. Some of these are hard to tell. Along with other life-threatening things that Bob did to himself, I'll share one of them in a second. Bob was a survivor of 2 quadruple bypass surgeries. And with the doctor's help and a lot of prayers from all of you in this room, he was able to keep living a very, very full life. Now, one of Bob's favorite expressions was, if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space in the middle. I feel sorry for those of you in the middle of the room. Allow me to translate that for you on what Bob thought. On your way in today, I hope you noticed that there's Bob's ice boat out in the front lawn. That is the infamous ice boat. An ice boat, as its name implies, indicates that the boat needs to be sailed on ice. They go fast. They go 60 miles an hour, and they don't have any brakes. An important element of ice boating is ice, and ideally, you would like it to be thick. One year, living on the edge Bob wanted to go ice boating. However, the lake wasn't completely frozen. Long story short, Bob took off flying around the lake, found a spot of open water in the middle of the lake. Luckily, the ice boat is made of wood, and it floats. It floated just long enough for the helicopter to arrive and lift Bob from the frozen water to safety. Thank goodness. Bob loved everything about water, from sailing on it when it was frozen to captaining a charter boat with friends in the British Virgin Islands, which he did a number of times. Those of you from Lake Quivira, you all know about the Jungle Cruise. It's the channel in the southeast corner of the lake, filled with various animals, not necessarily common to Kansas. This was a Bob Lee creation, using PVC piping and working in his garage, right, Pat? Or down in Florida, Bob would create wonderful animals. Starting with Icarus the giraffe and Zebulon the zebra, he, Pat, and other skilled pontoon drivers would place the animals throughout the channel. This makes for a wonderful tour, morning and night, for young and old. When Bob wasn't on a lake or an ocean, Bob was on a river. For 42 years, he'd go down the Buffalo River, rain or shine. Back on land, Bob loved horseback riding across the Maroon Bells in Colorado. He'd ride his motorcycle. I just learned this from the back. He'd ride his motorcycle all around Kansas and Missouri and took 3 trips to Sturgis, right? And I did hear that one time he jumped off the bike and ran into a tree and was demolished, but that's a sidebar. He was a master gardener, a fabulous garden in your own backyard. He couldn't grow enough of his favorite leaf lettuce. Whether on land or on water, Bob was a brother, a father, an amazing grandpa, a husband, and an exceptional friend to all of us here today. My last and favorite story about Bob is a very simple one. Bob would wake up randomly some morning. He'd turn to Pat and tell Pat, "Hey Pat, I'm gonna go outside and find a 4-leaf clover." Within moments, of course, Bob would return with a 4-leaf clover, the symbol of prosperity and good luck. Just like that clover, we were all very lucky to have Bob in our lives. Thank you.
It's hard to talk about a man that was loved by so many people, especially me, my sister, close family, friends. That man touched more mouths and more hearts in his lifetime than I'll ever know. I'm going to go off what I wrote here. What does one say about a man that had it all and did everything? What does one say about a man that loved life to the fullest? A man that when he decided he wanted to do something, he just made it happen. Bob is all of this, made mistakes, but he was also one to love and always forgive. There are so many memories that I could stand up here and talk for a month, maybe more. As you all have your fond memories of Bob, that you will always hold near to your heart, I have so many. It's incredible. A few fond memories that I will always hold near and always look back on with a smile on my face and in my heart. When I was very young, he was really involved in probably more involved than I was in Cub Scouts. But he was so amazing. It wasn't just dental work. He could do woodwork, leather work. He could do anything with his hands. And so we not only built our car, but we went above and beyond that because that's how he is. He says, well, let's just make the whole track. Okay, so we did. We did make the track. It was great for everyone. Everybody's cars were really fast except for the one that counted, mine. But I'll never forget making that entire track, and it was absolutely amazing. Kids can be annoying. I was, still am. I was about 7 or 8. We were working on our dock. It was probably the first or second week of April. And I was bound and determined to go swimming. So he made that happen after 30 minutes of me hounding him about it, and he tossed me in the lake and said, okay, sink or swim. What he didn't count on was the 30 pounds of wet clothes and the coat I was wearing at the time. So he had to reach down and pull me out of the water, but I never asked again. Never asked again. My last memory that I really want to share with you guys is many years later, I brought a beautiful young woman with me. And when I did, if I remember correctly, we were up here for a Calvin Coolidge comedy show. And it was the first time he'd ever met my wife, who is my wife still. And we had a great time. My wife's wine glass was never empty. Well, it was my girlfriend at the time. Now, we're not sure if it was a magic glass or if somebody was magically pouring into the glass. But when we left, she was a little tipsy, but the happiest she'd ever been. And he never was judgmental of anybody. He loved everybody. But his deepest love, even above his family, was music, because he could touch everybody with music. Bob, you were a great man, friend, husband, grandfather, and most importantly to me, the best father that I could have ever been blessed with. Every morning when I hear the birds sing, get a sudden smell of fresh pine like a campfire in Colorado, or when I hear your grandsons play their trumpet or their saxophone, I will remember how much you love life and how deeply you loved all the memories you made with your family and loved ones. Keep playing that music, as we all know you will. Love you, Dad.
Support and hugs that you've given us this last couple of weeks. My dad's kind of hard to explain in a few words, but I'm going to try to explain a little bit of how we survived living with him. I think he touched so many lives because of his zest. And in his last few years, I remember hearing him say, I want to get to heaven. And he went to Bible studies and he played at church, and I just think, you know, he had such a zest for life. He just wanted to have a party forever after. And I think he's in heaven. So we all have memories of Bob. Some are hilarious and some are harrowing. And I do have a few. Since he was my dad, I'm going to tell you about the lessons I learned from him. When he started this dental practice, I don't know, a long time ago. We lived in Bonner Springs before we lived at Lake Quivira. And he would come home for lunch. And I remember him, he had 2 bologna sandwiches. He would come sit at the kitchen table and he would lay out 4 pieces of Wonder White bread, put some Miracle Whip on them, some pickle relish, 2 pieces of Oscar Mayer bologna, and then sprinkle it with Laurie seasoned salt. Put the top on. And then he'd eat them, and he left the outline of the sandwiches. And then as he
ate them, the pickle relish juice would fall out. I don't know if he ever cleaned it up or my mom did, but he'd come home for lunch, and one of the times he came home, and I'm embellishing too because it's been a long time that all this happened, but I was on a tricycle, and there was a hill near our house. I couldn't have been more than 2 or 3. And so we got on the tricycle, and we start rolling down this hill. And pretty soon the hill got kind of steep, and the wheels are going a little faster, and I can't keep up. And he says, lift up your legs. And so I lifted up my legs, and we go whirling, whizzing down to the bottom, lickety-split. I'm sure he was scared to death. I thought he was in control, so I thought it was all okay. My lesson there, if things get out of control, just lift up your feet. We went from tricycle to motorcycle. He bought a motorcycle when I was probably, I don't know, guessing 7, 8, 9. And we were at Mort Sports Center in Bonner Springs, and I know it was around Easter because the consolation gift for buying a motorcycle, we got a little chick. So I had a little chick in my house. Later I think we thought it was a duck when it grew up, I'm not sure, but anyway, of course, Dad just thought he could do anything, and so he put me on the back of the motorcycle one time, and we took a little spin around Bonner, and we went over some railroad tracks and got wedged in the track and fell over. And so I had a skinned knee and skinned elbow and a little bit disturbed. And we went home. He says, we won't tell your mother. Lesson learned, you don't have to reveal everything. So he had a love for canoeing. He went down the Buffalo River, which is where 2 of my sons are right now, honoring him on the Buffalo River annual trip. So he took my mom and I down the Buffalo River one year. I know they picked me up from 3rd grade in Bonner Springs, and I had white go-go boots. And we went down, we were all packed up, we got in the canoe, and Mom's in the front, Dad's in the back, I'm in the middle with a Mae West life jacket. And we go down, and there's a big tree in the middle of the river. And Mom says, Bob, there's a tree. Bob, there's a tree. And we hit the tree. And we went down under the tree and up, and the canoe was upside down, and I remember in my Mae West life jacket, thank God, holding on to the seam of the canoe floating down, and the milk cartons were going like this down the river, and all of our camping gear was at the bottom of the river. But that night, we were able to have a dinner. Dad dove to the bottom of the river and retrieved a lot. And we ate steak that night without silverware. My lesson there is wear a life jacket, and it's more fun to eat without silverware. Well, let's see, he tried to kill me on a trike, a motorcycle, a canoe. Now it's time for him to learn how to fly. So at some point, he took flying lessons, and he joined the flying dentist. So my poor mom, I always thought she was smart, but I'm not sure now. We went on a flying dentist convention trip. And we were talking about this other night, and I'm not sure, we have our stories mixed up, and it doesn't matter, but we're flying, and I'm very motion sick prone, so they gave me a Dramamine, so I'm out. And we're flying, and evidently the weather came in, and we were caught up in the clouds. And so Dad kind of is a little panicky here, and he calls the air traffic controller, and the guy says, how much instrument time do you have? How much mountain time do you have? And Dad says, about 15 minutes. So Dad tells my mother, look for a hole in the clouds. So she found a hole, and he says, don't take your eye off of it, and we went, Phew. Now this is where we don't remember the story, but we landed in a different state. I think we were going to Colorado, but we landed in Wyoming or something like that. But it was, and I woke up and everything was fine. So my lesson learned there is Colorado and Wyoming are bordering states, and always take 2 Dramamine, not 1. Okay, moving right along. After that, we decided let's just stay on the ground. We bought an RV. That's where we're going to do our vacations. So we had a few RVs, but by this time we had my brother Galen. I still hadn't been killed yet, so we brought another one in, and we took the RVs on wonderful trips, and we were, you know, Dad would never just drive on I-70. We had to take mountain roads that were built for, you know, ATVs and such. So we're driving along mountain roads, and this poor little RV, big RV, I think it was, started having some issues. It started hissing and having some engine problems. And pretty soon Dad just stops the RV and he looks at Mom and me and Galen and he says, get out of here, it's gonna blow. So we evacuate the RV and we go running down the mountainside, and I remember, and so I'm 12, I don't know, and I'm running down and, you know, holding on the gravel is, you know, scraping us, and we're just running as fast as we can down the mountain. And then we get to a safe place and we look up at our RV and we wait. And we wait. And then pretty soon Dad gives the all clear. Well, I guess it's not gonna blow. So we go back up, and I think it was a vapor lock or something. My lesson learned at this point is, don't take any more vacations with this clown. So I'm older now. We're staying at Lake Quivira. Summers at Lake Quivira. As we all know about Bob's fleet of vehicles, some of us more than others, I went through a whole fleet that one summer and wrecked everything. I started it off, I wrecked my mom's brand new Cadillac, then I almost ran the convertible into the lake. We had a 3-wheeled golf cart that only went in reverse and had sparks. And then we had an Invader. It was the fastest boat on the lake, Dad would claim. He'd take it home every winter, put new fiberglass. He said this was going to be the fastest boat on the lake. And we'd go out, and of course it would leak. And but he taught me, when you're driving down the lake, if it does start getting full of water, Suzanne, while you're skiing with your friends, what you do is you just go really fast down the middle of the lake, and then you just get out of the driver's seat and you crawl back underneath the boat and you pull out the plug and let the water run out. Of course I did that. He was my dad. Which is only fitting that the last week that I took his pontoon boat out, the propeller fell off and we were stranded. So my lesson learned there is know the ins and outs of every kind of vehicle that you ever get in contact with, especially of Bob's fleet. We shared a love of riding motorcycles and bird watching, and of course playing music and piano. I would play the piano at home, and he loved to join in, whether it was his harmonica or a trombone or a trumpet or a banjo. I was like, I just wanted to play this song by myself. And so it got to be where I'd have to tell him, you have to wait and let me play the intro, then you can come in. He was a hands-on daddy. At a certain point, I think it was 4th grade, we realized that Suzanne did not know her multiplication tables. And he spent every night for a week in our basement, and we learned the multiplication tables. I still remember 6, 6, 36, all the rhymes. He was not a perfect parent, though. My brother and I had some interesting things that happened. He took my brother to a skating party, a school skating party, and when he picked him up, he said, "Well, how was it?" And Galen said, "It was great, Dad. I didn't know anybody. It was the wrong school." Then, before that, actually, he took me to a church choir concert, dropped me off. I went in, sang. Dad picked me up and said, "How was it?" I said, "Well, it was great, Dad. It wasn't our church, but I sang anyway." Lesson learned, make the best of every situation and sing or skate wherever you are. All right. Well, I'm gonna wrap it up here, but he had amazing good habits, actually. He every morning he drank his coffee out of a blue and white Corningware percolator. Took him 3 days to drink the whole pot. 3rd day was pretty amazing. He read the paper, loved the obituary. That's why we spent a lot of money on the obituary. And he exercised. He had great work ethic when he worked, which wasn't very much. When he came home from working, he made hamburgers. He was a great cook. He made stuffed hamburgers, green pepper, onion, or not, just American cheese, hickory smoke. He put it on a plate, all this hamburger patties, and he said, "I'm going to the riverbank." And he walked out to his old smoky and made his hamburgers. And he'd always send me off saying, "You got everything? Your checklist, notes, books, permission slips?" And then later, as I got older, he said, "Uphold the family name," which I had to remind him of that in the last few years. But probably the most valuable lesson that he taught me is to look at things and be able to change my perspective of how things are. You know, if there's a rope all tangled up and you're in a hurry, he would say, "Oh, good, a challenge." And that's one of my better lessons from him, because he was a positive person, and it's very apparent with all you here that he made that effect on everybody. He was a wonderful grandfather, and he always said he would lift me up. He could always lift me up and carry me. And I said, in the last few years when he got almost the same weight as I was, I said, "Can you pick me up?" He said, "Well, I might not be able to now. But I feel like now, with his happy, wonderful energy, he is carrying me now, for sure." And I appreciate you all being here. You cannot imagine how much this helps me and my brother and Pat and my mother. He was one of a kind. He was my dad. Thanks.
We offer our thanks to God for the life of Bob Lee,
whose lived life is almost too broad,
and too deep for mere words.
and yet we try.
For Bob, who lifted hearts and spirits of everyone who entered the clubhouse on Sunday morning by the sound of his piano.
Thanks be to God. For Bob, who brought a good morning sunshine attitude to every Sunday morning, regardless of the weather.
Thanks be to God. For Bob, who never really met a stranger and uplifted so many people simply by the sound of his voice and his genuine interest in others.
Thanks be to God. For Bob, who celebrated color in people's eyes, in people's clothing, in nature, and in life, and who always had a compliment on the ready.
Thanks be to God. For Bob, who interrupted sermons in dramatic moments by playing dramatic chords on the piano.
Thanks be to God. For Bob, whose creativity could not be contained and was manifested partially through music, crossword concoctions, and whimsical creatures scattered throughout the Lake Quivira landscape.
Thanks be to God. For Bob, who could play the church in the Wildwood and just a closer walk with thee like no one else.
Thanks be to God. For Bob, whose life link to Pat was clearly present on Sunday mornings,
Trips to Florida, life on the lake,
times with family and friends.
doctor's offices, hospital stays.
Well, the list is simply too long because for Bob, the connection with Pat was life.
Thanks be to God. For Bob, who dreamed of going to heaven from his childhood until his death.
Thanks be to God. And for Bob, who was most comfortable with while at the same time marveling at his experience of truth, he relished life's gifts from God.
Thanks be to God. For Bob, who was convinced of God's existence because of his scientific exploration that drew him to conclude that science and religion are not in competition with each other, but are partners in the pursuit of truth.
Thanks be to God. For Bob, for whom faith in God was not something to possess or to box up. While God was mystery, Bob found delight in new insights from hymns, art, or nature. God was God, and while beyond our understanding, was always palpably present.
Thanks be to God. For Bob, who was comfortable with questions that had no answers.
Thanks be to God. And for Bob, who loved mightily, whether family, friends, his church community, he loved to love.
Thanks be to God. For Bob, whose life is best described by the hymn Pass It On.
Thanks be to God. And for Bob, who looked death in the face countless times and said, not yet. And now on the other side of resurrection, he stands with Christ and says, oh, yes.
And so, oh God, we know these Thanksgivings are but a mere beginning of all that we have in our hearts regarding the dear friends, the life of Bob Lee.
And we remain very thankful that he is now safely with you, O God, restored completely and fully alive, playing that piano. He has experienced the promise of the hymn, I'll Fly Away.
So, as we close this celebration, let's join together in celebrating Bob by singing that final song, I'll Fly Away. The words are in your program.
We also have a Bob Lee verse that we're adding in. Not again. Woo! Power
Some great morning when this life is over, I'll fly away to a home on God's celestial shore. I'll fly away. I'll fly
That concludes today's celebration of Bob. Thank you all for coming. I'd like to remind you all to please pick up a CD if you haven't already. The buffet is still behind us. And again, thank you all for coming on this celebration of Bob.